Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Dear students, Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to the course Communication Theories 2. Today I will discuss with you a theory and its name is dependency theory. So let's start it from the introduction and later I will discuss different things including in this topic. So this theory was officially developed in the late 1960s following the World War II as the scholars searched for the root issue in the lack of development in Latin America. Dependency theory is the notion that resources flow from a periphery of poor and underdeveloped states to a core of wealthy states, enriching the latter at the expense of the former. It is a central contention of dependency theory that poor states are impoverished and rich ones enriched by the way poor states are integrated into the world system. The theory arose as a reaction to modernization theory, as earlier theory of the development which held that all societies progress through similar stages of development, that today's underdeveloped areas are thus in a similar situation to that of today's developed areas at some time in the past, and that therefore the task of helping the underdeveloped areas out of poverty is to accelerate them along this supposed common path of developments. Investment, technology transfers, and closer to integration into the world market. Dependency theory rejected this view, arguing that underdeveloped countries are not merely primitive versions of developed countries but have unique features and structures of their own, and importantly are in the situation of being the weaker members in a world market economy. Dependency theory no longer has many proponents as in overall theory, though some writers have argued for its continuing relevance as a conceptual orientation to the global division of wealth. Dependency theorist typically divides into two different categories surrounding the theory. One is the liberal reformists, and the next one is neo-Marxists. Those that align with liberal reformists typically believe that targeted policies interventions is the most effective approach to improving lives. Comparatively, neo-Marxists believe a command-centered economy is the more effective approach to improving lives. When you look at the history of dependency theory, it originates with the two papers, and these papers were published in 1949. Who published this? One is the Hans Singer and the next one is Raoul Prebisch, in which the authors observe that the terms of trade for underdeveloped countries relative to the developed countries had deteriorated over time. The underdeveloped countries were able to purchase fewer and fewer manufactured goods from the developed countries in exchange of a given quantity of their raw materials exports. This idea is known as the Prebisch-Singer thesis. Prebisch, an Argentine economist in the United Nations Commission for the Latin America, he went on to conclude that the underdeveloped nations must imply some degree of protectionism in trade if they were to enter a self-sustaining development path. He argued that import substitutions, industrializations, not a trade and export orientation, was the best strategy for underdeveloped nations. This theory was developed from a Marxian perspective by Powell A. Barron in 1957 with the publication of The Political Economy of Growth. Dependency theory shares many points with the earlier Marxist theories of imperialism by Rosa Luxemburg and Lenin, and has attracted continued interest from Marxists. Some authors identify two main streams in dependency theory. One is the Latin American structuralist. Next one is the typified by the work of Priebig, the Celso Furtado, and Aníbal Pinto at the United Nations Economic Commissions for Latin America. Using the Latin American dependency model, the Marxist historian Walter Rodney in his book name is How Europe Underdeveloped Africa, and he described this in 1972 in Africa that had been consciously exploited by European imperialists, leading directly to the modern underdevelopment of most of the continent. He was popular in the 1960s and 1970s as a criticism of modernization theory, which was falling increasingly out of favor because of continued widespread poverty in much of the world. At that time, the assumptions of liberal theories of development were under attack. It was used to explain the causes of over-urbanizations, a theory that urbanization rates outpaced industrial growth in several developing countries. The Latin American structuralist and the American Marxist schools, they had significantly differences, but both groups would agree that at the core of the dependency relation between center and periphery, it lies the inability of the periphery to develop an autonomous and dynamic process of technological innovations. Technology force unleashed by the industrial revolution is at the center of stage. The center countries control the technology and the systems for generating technology. The foreign capital couldn't solve the problem since it only led to limited transmission of technology, but not the process of innovation itself. Baran and others frequently spoke for the international division of labor, skilled workers in the center, unskilled in the periphery, when discussing key features of dependency. In the 1960s, members of the Latin American structuralists argued that there is more latitude in the system than the Marxists believed. They argued that it allows for partial development or dependent developments, but still under the control of outside decision makers. They cited the partly successful attempts at industrialization in Latin America around that time, like Argentina, Brazil, Mexico, as an evidence for this hypothesis. They were led to the position that dependency is not a relation between commodity exporters and industrialized countries, but between countries with different degrees of industrializations. In their approach, there is a distinction made between the economic and political spheres. Economically, one may be developed or underdeveloped, but even if somewhat economically developed. One may be politically autonomous or dependent. I will summarize the words of Cardoso about dependency theory. He said that there is a financial and technological penetrations by the development by the developed capitalist centers of the countries of the periphery and semi periphery. This produces an unbalanced economic structure both within the peripheral societies and between them and the centers. This leads to limitations on self sustained growth in peripheries. This favors the appearance of specific patterns of class relations. These requires modifications in the role of the state to guarantee both the functioning of the economy and the political articulation of a society, which contains within itself and the structural imbalance. There were different criticisms on dependency theories. I will discuss it one by one. The economic policies based on dependency theory have been criticized by free market economists such as the Peter Bauer and Martin Wolf, and there were a few others. One was the lack of the competition by subsidizing in countries' industries and preventing outside imports. These companies may have less incentives to improve their products, to try to become more efficient in their processes, to please customers, or to reach new innovations. The second was the sustainability, that the industries reliant on government support may not be sustainable for very long, particularly in poorer countries, in countries which largely depend on foreign aid from more developed countries. Domestic opportunity cost. The subsidies on domestic industries come out of state coffers and therefore represent money not to spend in other ways like development of domestic infrastructure, seed capital, or need based social welfare programs. At the same time, the higher prices caused by tariffs and restrictions on imports require the people either to forego these goods altogether or buy them at higher prices, foregoing other goods. There are different examples of dependency theory. Like many nations have been affected by both the positive and negative effects of the dependency theory. The idea of national dependency on another nation is not a relatively new concept. Even though the dependency theory itself is rather new, dependency is perpetuated by using capitalism and finance. The dependent nations come to owe the developed nations so much money and capital that it is not possible to escape the debt, continuing the dependency for the foreseeable future. And an example of the dependency theory is that during the years of between 1650, the Britain and other European nations took place or colonized other nations. They used their superior military technology and naval strength at the time to do this. They began an economic system in the America, Africa, and even in Asia to then export the natural materials from their land to Europe. After shipping the materials to Europe, Britain and other European countries made products with these materials and then sent them back to colonized parts of the America, Africa, and Asia. This resulted in the transfer of wealth from these regions' products to Europe for taking control of the products. Dependency theory is considered rather controversial, and many say it is not still in effect. Some scholars and politicians claim that with the decline of colonialism, dependency has been erased. Other scholars counter this approach and state that our society still has national powerhouses such as the United States, European nations, Germany, and Britain, China, and rising India. Currently, India is not rising, their economy is even worse than our country. Hundreds of other nations rely on for military aid, economic investment, etc. Different theorists or other theorists and their related theories. Two other early writers relevant to dependency theory were Francois Purex and Kurt Rothschild. Other leading dependency theorists were also involved in this theory, but I will discuss that many of these authors focused their attentions on Latin America. Dependency theory in the Islamic world was primarily refined by the Egyptian economist. His name is Samir Amin. Based on the works of Samir Amin from 1973 to 1997, list the different characteristic of periphery capitalism, like the regression in both agriculture and small-scale industry characterized the period after the onslaught of foreign dominations and colonialism. Unequal international specialization of the periphery leads to the concentrations of activities in export-oriented agriculture or of mining. Some industrialization of the periphery is possible under the condition of low wages, which together with rising productivity determine that unequal exchange sets in double factorial terms of trade. These structures determined in the long run are repeatedly growing different sectors with the hidden unemployment and rising the importance of rent in overall social and economic system. I think this enough for today. Thank you so much for watching my video lecture. Kindly subscribe my channel because I will upload next theories in coming future, so you will be able to get it easily. Thank you once again and best of luck.